Everything looks wrong, and even the ocean does not look as it should today. Those were the chilling words of a veteran pilot just before 5 bombers vanished completely. How does an entire squadron of planes simply disappear during a routine flight in broad daylight? This is the story of Flight 19, the defining mystery of the infamous Bermuda Triangle. In December 1945, 5 torpedo bombers set out on a standard patrol over the Bahamas. These 5 massive steel birds were erased from the sky like a pencil mark on a map. Known collectively as Flight 19, these TBM Avenger aircraft were piloted by highly skilled naval aviators. At the lead was Charles Carroll Taylor, a seasoned veteran with thousands of hours of flight time. They departed from Fort Lauderdale, expecting a routine exercise in the clear skies of the Atlantic. What happens when a seasoned combat veteran suddenly loses his entire sense of reality and direction? Navigation relied on dead reckoning, a method that requires absolute precision and steady instruments to succeed. The planes were supposed to fly past Great Abaco Island before returning safely to the coast. Instead, the horizon began to blur, and the pilots reported that their compasses were spinning wildly. 14 men were about to vanish into a geographic void that would soon captivate the world. Static-heavy radio calls are all that remain of the final moments of this ill-fated training mission. The search for Flight 19 would eventually involve a PBM Martin Mariner, which also disappeared mysteriously. It was as if the sky itself opened up and swallowed the squadron without leaving any debris. This single event transformed the Bermuda Triangle from a maritime curiosity into a global obsession. No wreckage was ever found, and no bodies were recovered from the vast, unforgiving blue waters. But to understand how 14 men could simply cease to exist, we must go back. We must return to the exact moment these 5 planes first left the solid ground. Before the crisis unfolded for Flight 19, there was only the place a stretch of water, feared by many. This infamous expanse of the Atlantic Ocean is known by many names, but we remember it for one. Imagine an area of open ocean larger than the state of Alaska where navigation rules seem to vanish. This is the Bermuda Triangle, a massive oceanic vacuum that has swallowed countless ships and planes without warning. Its boundaries are defined by 3 distinct points that form a jagged, invisible shape across the deep blue. To the west, the sun-drenched coast of mainland Florida serves as the first corner of this mysterious map. Following the line north, across the waves, leads us to the isolated and beautiful islands of Bermuda itself. From there, the boundary plunges south, toward the vibrant shores of Puerto Rico, to complete the legendary shape. Within these 3 landmarks lies a staggering territory spanning over 500,000 square miles of treacherous sea. Can a simple triangle drawn upon a nautical map truly hold this much power over human life? Is there something unique about these specific coordinates that causes the ocean to look wrong to experienced pilots? For decades, analysts have questioned if these waters possess a force that defies traditional dead reckoning navigation techniques. The scale of this environment is so immense that even the massive TBM Avenger feels like a speck. Pilots like Charles Carroll Taylor were trained to master the skies, yet this geography remains an unpredictable foe. Even the heavy PBM Martin Mariner rescue planes find themselves dwarfed by the sheer emptiness of this region. Setting out from Fort Lauderdale, the crews initially saw only the routine beauty of the surrounding tropical waters. They flew toward Great Abaco Island, unaware they were entering a zone where the very horizon might lie. The Atlantic here is deep and unforgiving, hiding secrets beneath layers of turquoise and dark, crushing sapphire. Within this vast 500,000 square miles, a routine training mission was quickly becoming a haunting ghost story. The shape of the mystery was forming long before the first pilot reported that everything looked wrong today. Historians and scientists alike struggle to explain why this particular patch of water claims so many unsuspecting victims. Beyond the statistics, the Bermuda Triangle represents a conceptual void where logic and reality often seem to drift. Every mile flown over these waves brings a pilot closer to the edge of the known and the unexplained. The mission of Flight 19 would soon test the limits of this geography in ways no one expected. It began at 2:10 p.m. at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale on a routine Wednesday afternoon in 1945. The date was December 5th, a day that would soon be etched into aviation history forever. 5 TBM Grumman Avengers sat idling on the tarmac, their engines roaring with deceptive, mechanical confidence. At the lead was Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, a 28-year-old veteran with a distinguished service record. Taylor brought immense skill to the mission, having served 2 intense tours of duty in the Pacific. With over 2,000 hours of flying time, He was a master of the skies he navigated. Behind him sat his trainees, young men who lacked the seasoned instincts of their highly decorated commander. Most of these airmen were beginners, having only accumulated 20 to 30 hours of flight time each. These students looked to Taylor with absolute trust, never questioning the veteran's ability to lead them home. He was like a master chess player guiding novices across a board he had played 1,000 times. How does a man with such vast experience get lost during a simple run on a sunny afternoon? As the clock struck to 10 p.m., the 5 heavy bombers finally lifted off into the Florida sky. They left the safety of Fort Lauderdale behind, soaring over the coastline toward the vast Atlantic horizon. On paper, this was a simple afternoon stroll, a routine exercise designed to sharpen their combat skills. The group relied on dead reckoning, a traditional method of navigation using speed, time, and compass headings. Their primary objective was a mock bombing run over the Hens and Chicken Shoals in the Bahamas. These shallow waters were the first target in a flight plan that seemed entirely straightforward and safe. The mission was structured into 3 distinct legs, tracing a predictable path across the warm tropical waters. The entire training exercise was estimated to last only around 2 to 3 hours from start to finish. The airmen expected a quick trip, fully intending to return to the base in time for dinner. Could these students have saved themselves if they had not placed such blind faith in their leader? As Flight 19 headed east, the simple plan dissolved into one of the Bermuda Triangle's greatest mysteries. 3 legs and a few hours of flying were all that stood between them and the unknown. The TBM Avenger was no ordinary aircraft. It was a rugged beast, built for brutal naval warfare. Flight 19 consisted of 5 powerful Grumman-built machines, each a heavy-hitting titan of the mid-40s skies. While they looked invincible in the air, these warbirds carried a hidden and surprisingly dangerous technical vulnerability. This specific model gained fame for sinking massive Yamato-class battleships during the height of the Pacific War. Yet, despite their legendary combat record, these planes were about to face an enemy they couldn't outmaneuver. Departing from Fort Lauderdale, the crews utilized the traditional method of dead reckoning to track their position. Without sighting landmarks like Great Abaco Island, pilots had to trust their compasses over their own eyes. It is a chilling irony that a plane built for destruction could be defeated by simple sensory over the featureless waters of the Bermuda Triangle. The Avenger's navigation equipment faced a uniquely punishing challenge. Leader Charles Carroll Taylor understood that even the toughest aircraft is useless if the pilot loses his way. Dead reckoning required perfect timing, but the shifting winds over the Atlantic often mocked even the best calculations. The Avenger's heavy armor offered absolutely no protection against the crushing psychological weight of being lost at sea. These machines were the undisputed masters of the Pacific, yet they became fragile shadows within this strange stretch. 5 powerful engines hummed together, unaware that mechanical strength was useless against a failing sense of direction. The ruggedness of the Grumman design earned it a reputation for bringing pilots home through the worst storms. Scene 5 TBM Avenger's information usually signaled the end for any enemy target on the open ocean. But the sea below offered no landmarks today, only a vast, shimmering mirror that reflected their growing panic. When the magnetic compasses began to fail, these sturdy war machines effectively became high-speed cages of deep uncertainty. This was a tragedy where the mechanical giants were blinded by the very environment they were meant to dominate. Even the massive PBM Martin Mariner would eventually struggle against the same unforgiving forces that claimed Flight 19. The roaring thunder of their engines would soon be replaced by a silence that has lasted for decades. A legacy of military strength was being rewritten by a mystery that defied every known rule of aviation. By 3:40 p.m., the routine training flight transformed into a chilling struggle for survival against the unknown. 90 minutes into the flight, the primary tools of survival, the compasses, simply stopped working. The rugged TBM Avenger planes of Flight 19 suddenly began to lose their grip on reality. At exactly 3:40 p.m., Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor reported a catastrophic failure of both his compasses. For a veteran pilot with 2,000 hours, losing your bearings is like being suddenly blindfolded. Taylor's voice crackled over the radio, announcing that he no longer knew which way was north. Miles away, the ground crew at Port Everglades listened in stunned silence to the unfolding confusion. Lieutenant Robert Cox, commanding another squadron nearby, caught the first desperate transmissions from the lost planes. Cox immediately attempted to guide the disoriented leader, but atmospheric interference made communication increasingly difficult. Taylor insisted he was flying over the Florida Keys, though his flight plan suggested otherwise. This critical error in judgment would set the stage for one of history's most enduring mysteries. Losing your compass in the Atlantic is like being abandoned in the middle of a trackless desert. While Taylor thought he saw the Keys, he was likely drifting far out over the Bahamas. The calm blue waters below offered no clues to the 5 crews fighting a rising panic. In the world of dead reckoning, a single instrument failure can quickly lead to total disaster. Radio monitors at Port Everglades struggled to make sense of the conflicting reports from the cockpit. When your instruments lie to you, who do you trust in the vastness of the Bermuda Triangle? The ground crews realized with growing dread that the squadron was moving further away from safety. Above the Great Abaco Island, the golden afternoon sun hid the invisible trap closing around them. Taylor's conviction about being in the Keys created a fatal disagreement with his fellow pilots. If a veteran pilot loses his way, the younger airmen have little hope of finding home. As Taylor's certainty faded, the ground crews could only listen to the terrifying confusion in the clouds. The iron-strong Avengers were now mere toys tossed about by an unseen magnetic force. The sun began to sink low, casting long, jagged shadows across the increasingly violent Atlantic waves. By 4:30 p.m., the once clear Florida sky surrendered to a wall of gray, turbulent storm clouds. Visibility vanished as the weather deteriorated, turning the training exercise into a desperate fight for survival. Inside the cockpits, the pilots watched their fuel needles creep steadily toward the dreaded empty mark. Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor struggled to maintain control as the magnetic compasses continued their useless spin. At 5:15 p.m., a moment of weary clarity struck Taylor as he radioed a new, final heading. He ordered Flight 19 to turn west, hoping to strike the Florida coast before their tanks ran dry. Every mile flown was a gamble against time, with the vast ocean waiting hungrily beneath their wings. The 5 TBM Avengers roared through the darkening squalls, their engines straining against the heavy, salt-laden air. Back at the base in Fort Lauderdale, radio operators strained to hear Taylor's fading, static-choked voice. Taylor's last communication was a grim promise to fly 270 degrees west until they hit landfall. He knew that if they did not see the coast soon, they would simply run out of gas. Imagine the weight of that decision, knowing every passing minute brought them closer to a watery grave. As the clock ticked past 6, the situation transitioned from a crisis to a looming catastrophe. The crews prepared for the unthinkable, checking their life vests as the engines began to sputter and cough. At 6:20 p.m., the final, chilling command from Lieutenant Taylor crackled across the emergency radio frequency. He ordered his men to ditch their aircraft together the moment any plane hit 10 gallons left. Safety lay in numbers, even as they prepared to plunge into the freezing, midnight black waters of the Atlantic. Ditching 5 massive planes in a storm is like trying to land a feather on a moving fan. One by one, the iron-strong Avengers prepared to surrender to the sea that had already claimed their senses. The radio hissed with static, then fell into a terrifying, absolute silence that no one could break. 14 men were now at the mercy of the waves, lost in a darkness where everything looked wrong. The Florida coast was nowhere to be found, leaving only the cold embrace of the Bermuda Triangle. The Navy launched an immense search party to find the lost patrol, but instead, they lost one of the rescuers. The sudden disappearance of Flight 19 was a tragedy, yet what happened next transformed it into an enduring legend. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the silence from the TBM Avengers grew heavy with a growing sense of dread. At 7 p.m. to PBM, Martin Mariner aircraft were diverted from their missions to assist in the urgent search. These massive, twin-engine flying boats were designed to withstand the brutal conditions of the open and unforgiving Atlantic Ocean. It was like sending a search party into a dark forest, only for the searchers to be swallowed too. The PBM Martin Mariners soared into the night, their crews scanning the black waves for any sign of life. Disaster struck when one of the PBM Martin Mariner search planes went completely silent just 30 minutes into its mission. After splitting off to cover its assigned sector, the heavy aircraft simply vanished without a single distress call. How does a massive flying boat simply disappear from the sky just half an hour after starting its mission? The rescuers had now become victims, adding another layer of terror to an already desperate situation in the Triangle. The response was unprecedented, as the military coordinated a massive effort to find any remains of the missing crews. Over the following days, more than 930 sorties were flown, scouring millions of square miles of the Atlantic. Every available ship and plane combed the area near Great Abaco Island, hoping for a miracle that never came. Is it possible for a rescue mission to become its own mystery while searching for a lost squadron? For 5 agonizing days, the search for Flight 19 and the missing mariner continued under the world's watchful eyes. Crews worked tirelessly through the day and night, refusing to believe that 14 men could truly be gone forever. Despite the Herculean effort, the search was officially called off on December 10th, 1945, leaving only questions behind. 5 days of searching and 930 sorties yielded absolutely zero trace of Flight 19 or the vanished Martin mariner. The ocean remained calm and empty, keeping its secrets buried deep within the heart of the infamous Bermuda Triangle. When the search finally ended, the investigation began because the Navy desperately needed answers. The official report did not blame aliens or magnetic vortexes for the disappearance of Flight 19. Instead, it pointed toward a single man and the simple absence of a reliable watch. Investigators eventually concluded that the tragedy was caused by pilot error on the part of Lieutenant Taylor. Can a missing clock really lead to the deaths of 14 men in the Bermuda Triangle? To understand how, we must examine the primary method of air navigation used during that era. Pilots like Charles Carroll Taylor relied heavily on a technique known as dead reckoning to find home. Dead reckoning is a navigational method using the sun's position and local time to establish current location. By tracking their heading and speed over time, airmen could calculate exactly where they were going. It is a precise mathematical dance between the movements of the sky and the ticking of a clock. However, this ancient science becomes a deadly trap when one of those variables is suddenly removed. Navigating by dead reckoning without a watch is like driving to a new city with a broken speedometer. Imagine trying to find your way through a featureless ocean without knowing how long you have traveled. Shockingly, none of the TBM Avenger planes in Flight 19 had working timekeeping devices installed. Without a way to measure elapsed time, Taylor was essentially flying blind over the vast Atlantic. He knew the sun's position, but he had no way to track his progress against the clock. This lack of equipment turned a routine training flight from Fort Lauderdale into a confusing nightmare. Taylor's experience from earlier flights should have saved him, but the missing clocks proved fatal. Every turn he made was a guess, based on intuition rather than the cold, hard math of time. The investigation highlighted how this technical failure left the veteran pilot stranded in a sea of uncertainty. What is dead reckoning when you have no way to measure the dead part of the calculation? Without time, the vast distance between Great Abaco Island and safety became an impossible, invisible barrier. The Navy's findings suggest that the mystery was born from human fallibility and missing gears. But Taylor wasn't just guessing. He was using a technique that required one thing he didn't have. At Port Everglades, ground crews listened intently to the frantic voices crackling through their radio sets. They could hear every word from Flight 19, yet their own desperate replies vanished into the void. This one-way window into the cockpit created a terrifying sense of helplessness for those on shore. The 1945 radio technology simply was not built to withstand the atmospheric chaos brewing over the Atlantic. By 4:30 p.m., the weather began to deteriorate, turning the clear skies into a wall of static. The ground crew monitored the transmissions, catching glimpses of the confusion spreading among the 5 pilots. Charles Carroll Taylor struggled to maintain control while his instruments and radios began to fail him simultaneously. While the ground crew heard the pilots' debates, the aviators themselves often could not hear each other. The TBM Avenger was a rugged machine, but its communication gear was no match for the storm. Heavy clouds and electrical interference created a physical barrier that blocked every outgoing signal from Port Everglades. It was an invisible trap, where the rescuers were shouting into a gale that refused to listen. Every attempted correction from the tower was swallowed by the crackling roar of the intensifying storm. As the clock passed for 30 p.m., the window for a successful recovery began to slam shut. The pilots were flying blind, unaware that their pleas for help were being heard miles away. This technical failure meant Taylor was essentially navigating a silent world despite the constant chatter on shore. Atmospheric noise from the shifting weather patterns effectively cut the flight's vital lifeline to the land. The ground crews recorded the pilots shouting panic, unable to offer a single word of guidance back. This disconnect between the listeners and the lost flyers is what truly sealed their mysterious fate. The radio silence was not a choice. It was a limitation of a world still mastering airwaves. Even as the sun dipped lower, the shore-based monitors could only wait and listen to fading signals. Looking down from 5,000 feet, The Bahamas appear hauntingly identical to the Florida Keys. This eerie resemblance would soon become a silent death sentence for the pilots of Flight 19. Here, the geography of the Bermuda Triangle transforms into a treacherous and confusing hall of mirrors. Charles Carroll Taylor faced a dilemma where the land below looked exactly like his familiar home. How do you realize you are lost when every landmark perfectly mimics a safe destination? It was like entering the wrong house, simply because the front door was a familiar color. Taylor became convinced his TBM Avenger was soaring over the Keys instead of the open Atlantic. He had mistakenly identified Great Abaco Island as a part of the familiar Florida chain. From high above, Great Abaco Island shares a deceptive profile with the nearby Grand Bahama. Below his wings, the Fish and Pensacola Cay stretched out in a long, narrow line. These tiny islands in the North Abaco chain provided a false sense of geographic security. Relying on dead reckoning, Taylor steered his squadron toward what he believed was the mainland. In truth, the patrol was drifting further away from the safety of Fort Lauderdale's coast. Ground stations eventually triangulated the group to a position 80 miles east of Palm Bay, where not over shallow coastal waters but deep in the unforgiving heart of the Atlantic. This simple visual error became the tragic root of the entire Flight 19 mystery. Every island Taylor spotted only reinforced his fatal belief that they were heading toward Florida. Even as a PBM Marta Mariner launched to help, the navigation trap remained firmly set. The commander's mind refused to accept that the compasses were right and his eyes wrong. By the time the mistake was realized, the squadron had flown far beyond any hope of rescue. Taylor thought he was flying over the Keys, heading directly for the safety of home. Instead, he was leading his men deeper into the silent graveyard of the Atlantic Ocean. For some, the rational explanation isn't enough, and they look to the skies for a different answer. But what if the Navy's pilot error was just a cover for something much more out of this world? The mid-1940s was not just an era of war. It was the dawn of a new, celestial mystery. In 1943, Allied and German air crews reported strange, glowing craft flying alongside their heavy bombers. These baffling Foo Fighters appeared as silent, luminous orbs that performed maneuvers impossible for modern aircraft. Could these same unidentified lights have been stalking the 5 TBM Avengers over the Atlantic Ocean? While investigators blamed Charles Carroll Taylor, a segment of the public began to suspect an otherworldly intervention. Believers wondered if the whitewater Taylor described was actually a portal or an alien magnetic distortion. In 1947, pilot Kenneth Arnold reported encountering a fleet of flying saucers while soaring over Nevada. Arnold's sighting sparked a national obsession, turning the open skies into a canvas for our deepest fears. That same summer, an unidentified craft supposedly crash-landed near Roswell Air Base in New Mexico. Suddenly, the disappearance of 14 airmen in the Bermuda Triangle didn't seem like a simple mechanical failure. Flight 19 became the foundation stone for the entire church of the modern Bermuda Triangle mystery. Why did pilots across the globe start reporting strange glowing craft in the same era of Flight 19? Is it a coincidence that the Triangle mystery exploded just as the modern UFO era began? Even the sudden explosion of the PBM Martin Mariner was reframed through the lens of extraterrestrial technology. The rigid naval reports from Fort Lauderdale could not compete with the growing folklore of alien abductions. For theorists, no amount of dead reckoning could explain how an entire patrol simply blinked out of existence. They argued the planes never reached Great Abaco Island, but were instead snatched by something from above. The vacuum left by the Navy's official silence was quickly filled by stories of silver discs and abductions. While the Navy looked at the maps, the public looked at the headlines of strange lights and crashed discs. Just as the Navy closed its files, a new era of mystery swept across the American landscape. In the summer of 1947, a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold witnessed something impossible over Nevada. He described 9 shimmering objects skipping across the sky like saucers thrown across a pond. News of these flying saucers spread like wildfire, capturing the imagination of a restless post-war public. Suddenly, every flickering light in the night sky became a potential visitor from another world. The world was still processing Arnold's sighting when another strange report emerged from New Mexico. Near the remote Roswell Air Base, an unidentified craft reportedly crashed during a violent thunderstorm. Debris scattered across the desert floor ignited a firestorm of speculation that has never truly died. The military initially claimed to have captured a flying disc before quickly changing their official story. This reversal only fueled the belief that the government was hiding a dark extraterrestrial secret. These twin events of 1947 fundamentally changed how people viewed the unexplained and the unknown. The public began looking backward at earlier mysteries. Through this new lens of cosmic intervention, people revisited the 1945 disappearance of Flight 19 with a fresh sense of paranormal wonder. What was once seen as a tragic navigational error was now reconsidered as a possible abduction. The final words of Charles Carroll Taylor were reinterpreted as a reaction to something truly otherworldly. Traditional methods like dead reckoning were suddenly ignored in favor of more fantastic, cosmic theories. If sources were in Nevada, could they have also been hovering over the Atlantic coast? The legend of the Bermuda Triangle began to coalesce around these sensational headlines and rumors. Flight 19 became the cornerstone of a new mythology where humans were mere pawns of aliens. The tragedy was no longer just about planes lost at sea, but about a cosmic encounter. By connecting Roswell to the lost TBM Avenger, the mystery grew beyond the reach of investigators. History was being rewritten in real time as the line between fact and science fiction blurred. The vanishing of the PBM Martin Mariner was also swept into this growing paranormal narrative. The shadows of the triangle were now inhabited by more than just wind and waves. As the 50s dawned, the missing pilots of Fort Lauderdale became symbols of a galactic mystery. Even the geography near Great Abaco Island was now scrutinized for signs of extraterrestrial activity. While some point to alien abductions, the second plane didn't vanish into a mysterious, swirling cosmic wormhole. Remember the Martin Mariner that vanished while searching for Flight 19 on that fateful December night? The truth behind its sudden disappearance is less paranormal, but certainly far more violent and explosive. To understand the tragedy, we must look at the mechanical guts of this massive flying machine. The PBM Martin Mariner was a powerhouse of aviation, yet it carried a deadly, hidden reputation. These specific aircraft were notoriously known among their crews to be dangerously prone to persistent fuel leaks. In reality, the Martin Mariner was essentially a giant flying gas tank, just waiting for a reason. Fumes would often fill the cabin, turning the interior into a pressurized chamber of highly flammable gasoline vapor. How do you keep a plane safe when it is literally prone to leaking fuel into the cabin? As the search for Flight 19 intensified, a merchant ship was navigating the dark Atlantic waters below. The crew of the tanker SS Gaines Mills watched the horizon, unaware they were about to witness history. At the exact moment the Mariner vanished from radar, the tanker crew reported a massive mid-air explosion. A sudden, brilliant flash of orange fire tore through the black sky, lighting up the churning ocean waves. They watched as a pillar of fire descended toward the sea, leaving only a lingering trail of smoke. What did the crew of the SS Gaines Mills see that the Navy tried so hard to piece together? Investigators realized the timeline of the explosion matched the Mariner's last known position with chilling, perfect precision. No wreckage was ever recovered from the deep, but the witness testimony provided a grim, logical answer. The mystery of the vanishing rescuer finally had a grounded, mechanical explanation that defied the supernatural claims. A single spark from a crewman's cigarette or a faulty wire could have ignited the entire aircraft instantly. A mechanical flaw, a fuel leak, and a single spark marked the end of this second tragedy. The Bermuda Triangle didn't swallow the Mariner. Its own design flaws likely sealed its fiery, terminal fate. Before they were known as the Lost Patrol, these planes were iconic symbols of American military power. These weren't flimsy training planes designed for simple drills in the sunny skies of Fort Lauderdale. The TBM Avenger was a rugged beast that earned its reputation in the heat of battle. During the Pacific War, these heavy hitters were used to sink massive Yamato-class battleships with precision. They were the heavyweight champions of the sky, built to endure the most brutal naval warfare imaginable. How does a machine built to survive world-class combat succumb to a routine flight over Florida? This irony makes the disappearance of Charles Carroll Taylor and his men even harder to swallow. They relied on dead reckoning, a method of navigation that eventually led them into a terminal trap. The tragedy transformed the TBM Avenger from a symbol of victory into a ghostly maritime enigma. While the PBM Martin Mariner shared their dark fate, Flight 19 remains the heart of the mystery. Their journey from Fort Lauderdale toward Great Abaco Island became the blueprint for every legend that followed. The silence that swallowed them birthed a new era of fascination with the dreaded Bermuda Triangle. We remember these planes today more for their disappearance than for their heroic triumphs in the Pacific. The legacy of Flight 19 is written in the salt spray and the static of lost radios. It is a story that challenges our understanding of the ocean and the machines we build. Every year, New explorers return to these waters, searching for a metal grave that remains hidden. The shadow of the Avengers still looms over the Atlantic, a permanent fixture of our collective imagination. What began as a training exercise ended as the ultimate catalyst for the world's greatest mystery. The loss of 5 powerful bombers and their crews left a wound in history that never closed. They went from symbols of victory to the face of the world's most enduring maritime enigma. The files are officially closed, but the haunting questions of Flight 19 still remain today. Decades later, the ocean has yet to give up the planes of Flight 19. So, where are they resting beneath the dark and restless waves of the Atlantic? Flight 19 remains the ultimate jigsaw puzzle, forever missing its 5 most critical, metallic pieces. Is the answer at the bottom of the Atlantic, or in the human mind's need for mystery? We remember Charles Carroll Taylor, a seasoned pilot suddenly lost in a world that looked wrong. His reliance on dead reckoning failed against a horizon that offered no familiar landmarks to follow. From the sun-drenched coast of Fort Lauderdale to the lonely stretches near Great Abaco Island, silence reigns. The TBM Avengers vanished, followed by the tragic explosion of the PBM Martin Mariner rescue plane. No oil slicks, no floating debris, and no radio signals ever emerged from that final flight. Some looked to the stars for answers, while others blame the shifting magnetic currents of the triangle. Perhaps the tragedy was simply a chain of human errors, amplified by a cruel, unforgiving sea. Yet, the legend of the Bermuda Triangle grows stronger every time we revisit this cold case. Will we ever truly solve the mystery of the lost patrol, or is it meant to stay hidden? Think back to that chilling transmission where Taylor claimed even the ocean did not look right. It is a reminder that even our most advanced machines are fragile against the power of nature. Now we turn to you, the observers and theorists who keep these historical mysteries alive. What do you believe happened to the crews on that routine Wednesday afternoon in 1945? Was it a navigational nightmare, or something far more sinister, lurking within the deep ocean? Share your theories in the comments below as we continue to hunt for the elusive truth. Every new perspective brings us one step closer to finding the planes that the world forgot. Because until those 5 planes are found, Flight 19 will always be out there, somewhere lost in the shifting tides and the enduring mystery of the Bermuda Triangle.